The town of Morio looks peaceful on the surface. It is quiet, suburban, and ordinary. The kind of place where nothing ever seems to happen. That illusion is exactly why Yoshikage Kira survives for so long. Kira is not a criminal who wants some sort of attention. He wants to remain anonymous. His ideal life is one where no one ever notices him, where he goes to work, returns home, and indulges in his compulsions without consequences. For 15 years, that desire succeeds. People vanish, accidents occur, bodies disappear, and no one connects the dots because he leaves nothing behind. How? I'll explain how that works later for those who aren't tuned into Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, but this is the case Batman would walk into. To understand whether Batman could solve it, you first have to understand how unfair the situation is. Kira does not leave fingerprints, he does not use weapons, he does not stalk victims in ways that can be recorded. His murder looks like coincidences or disappearances, not crimes. Even worse, the tool he uses to kill cannot be seen by ordinary humans. In the world of Jojo's Bizarre Adventure, that is called a stand. Kira's stand is called Killer Queen, turns anything it touches into a bomb. The explosion leaves no residue, no shrapnel, no chemical trace. People are simply erased, and that is one of the 3 abilities he has in his arsenal to keep himself anonymous. In Jojo's Bizarre Adventures, stands are manifestations of a person's fighting spirit. They are invisible to non-stand users and follows the rules that often only partially understood, even by their owners. There is no public knowledge of stands in the JoJo's world. Aside from the Speedwagon Foundation, the world of JoJo's doesn't have public knowledge for regular, everyday people like you and me. No textbook, no databases, no scientific consensus. Even experienced stand users frequently discover new limits or abilities in the middle of a fight. In this scenario, Batman would arrive in Morio with no framework for what he is facing. All he knows is that there has been a high missing persons case and he's going to get to the bottom of this. And yet, Batman has built his entire career around solving cases where the rules are unclear. Batman is not just a detective in the traditional sense. Across comics, animation, and film, he has repeatedly investigated crimes involving metahumans, alien tech, psychic phenomena, and forces he cannot initially explain.
Boo.
In stories like The Long Halloween, Hush, and Justice League Doom, Batman works without clear evidence, often relying on behavioral pattern and probability rather than physical proof. There is also his iconic contingency plan against the Justice League because you really never know what's going to happen, and Batman is not taking any chances. His greatest feat is his refusal to accept coincidence as an answer. When Batman arrives in Morio, he would not immediately assume the supernatural. The early killings will look like unsolved disappearances or tragic accidents. Victims vanish in public places, others die suddenly with no apparent cause. Local authorities, lacking the resource and context, treat each case in isolation, but Batman does not. He aggregates them. The first thing Batman would notice is that these deaths do not escalate anything further. Most serial killers would escalate. They grow bolder, sloppier, or even more violent. Kira does not do any of this. His killings remain consistent over time, careful and restrained. That lets Batman know that this killer is confident in his method and terrified of exposure. This immediately narrows the psychological profile. Kira is driven by self-preservation. Another detail would quietly stand out as Batman studies the cases together. The victims are overwhelmingly women. There is nothing left behind to explain why, no messages or trophies, but the pattern itself matters. Batman has dealt with killers like Calendar Man, who commits crime and murders people based on specific or significant holidays, and this one-sided selection points towards compulsion rather than randomness. Combined with the restraint and routine of the killings, it paints a clear picture of the murderer's inner life. This is someone's acting on a very specific fixation, choosing victims carefully and doing everything possible to keep that fixation hidden. Batman would then examine the victims themselves, or at least what they were like before they disappear. No signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no evidence that the victims knew they were in danger. This rules out ambush, poison, or conventional weapons. Whatever killed them acted instantly. Batman has encountered this before, such as when he faced the Scarecrow's fear toxin, or Clayface shape-shifting assaults, threats that could harm without leaving conventional evidence. He would probably call it magic or an unseen force. At this stage, Batman begins to suspect the killer is not acting alone. Not in the sense of accomplices, which he would assume at first, but in the sense of a proxy. Something is executing the act while the killer remains untouched. Batman has encountered comparable scenarios in his history. Hush, a master manipulator who often stays in the background, who would orchestrate elaborate schemes using other members of Batman's rogue galleries to act as his proxies. Of course, you got the Court of Owls, a secret society who operates in the shadow like Batman without ever revealing their identities. In Batman Arkham Knight, he analyzes environmental anomalies caused by unseen enemies. He understands the concept even if he doesn't understand the source. This is where Batman's technology becomes crucial. He would not be able to see Killer Queen itself because he's not a stand user, but he would be able to observe its consequences. Batman's equipment has repeatedly been used to analyze invisible threats by tracking heat fluctuations, vibration patterns, air displacement, and environmental damage. In Morio, he would be searching for the physical signatures left behind by something that shouldn't exist. Over time, a pattern would emerge. Using his experience from cases like the Arkham Knight and the Long Halloween, Batman would detect anomalies such as sudden pressure spikes, thermal fluctuations, and micro-vibration at the sites of unexplained deaths. He would feed this data into his analysis system, overlaying it with pedestrian movement, CCTV footage, proximity mapping. By correlating these environmental signatures with human presence, one individual will consistently appear near every incident yet remain unharmed. His movements would be highly structured and predictable, revealing the statistical outlier, Yoshikage Kira. This method mirrors how Batman has used forensic tech and environmental sensors in canon to track invisible or indirect threats, such as unseen attackers or remote devices. Batman would not immediately label him the killer. Instead, Kira becomes an outlier, someone statistically impossible to ignore. Batman has handled similar investigation in other stories, and in Detective Comics 871 through 881, The Black Mirror, where he identified a manipulative killer through subtle behavioral cues and environmental inconsistency. In these cases, Batman did not rely on one single piece of evidence. He reconstructed events, cross-referenced anomalies, and used probability to narrow suspects. Over time, the repeated patterns and statistical improbabilities pointed directly to the culprit. What makes this case dangerous is that Batman cannot afford to confront Kira directly. He cannot interrogate him, he cannot tail him too closely, he cannot touch anything in his environment without risk. Batman would recognize this very quickly. He has survived by knowing when not to engage. Against Kira, caution is survival. Batman's lack of stand awareness is a genuine disadvantage. He cannot see Killer Queen. He doesn't know its range, its triggers, or its limits. This makes the early phase of the investigation slow and risky, but it does not stop him. Batman does not need to understand what Killer Queen is, he only needs to understand when Kira becomes dangerous. He will begin testing the environment, not the suspect. Small disruptions, control variables, situations that force Kira to react without realizing he is being observed. Kira's responses would be subtle, but they would be there. Change in routine, increased vigilance, defensive behavior, these reactions would confirm Batman's suspicions without triggering retaliation. At this point, Batman would be convinced that logically, he would know Kira is responsible. The remaining question would be not whether Kira is the killer, but how to stop him without dying. This is where Batman's humanity matters. He cannot overpower Kira, he cannot see the weapon aimed at him. In a straight confrontation, Batman loses. He knows this. Batman has never been defined by winning fair fights, he only wins by controlling the conditions. With time, Batman's chances improve dramatically. Given weeks, not days, he can design countermeasures, remote containment, environmental traps, non-contact restraints. He can involve allies once he understands the nature of the threat, such as Jotaro or Josuke and his friends, but in this situation, we want to know how well Batman can solve this case on his own. Realistically, how long would this take? It would likely take several weeks for him to identify Kira with confidence, with the help of his advanced technology and his past experiences like this case, but unlike Morio's residents, Batman would never stop looking. Kira survives because people assume nothing is wrong. Batman never makes that mistake. So, what are Batman's chances? Solving the case is very likely. Neutralizing Kira alone is another story, and far more dangerous. But not impossible, with prep time of course, and with the help of the Tibetan monks.
It's just a trick I picked up from ancient Tibetan monks. Very handy.
Get a load of this guy.
But aside from that, Batman's greatest advantage is his restraint. He would never rush to reveal what he knows. Kira believes he is untouchable because nothing can be traced back to him. Batman has built his life on proving that nothing is ever truly invisible or impossible. The real question isn't whether Batman could beat Killer Queen in a fight, it's whether someone who lives in fear of being seen can survive against someone who never stops watching. One man kills to preserve a quiet life, the other gave up his quiet life so that no one else could hide behind silence. So, do you think Batman would be able to crack the case before Kira realizes he's being hunted? How long would you say? Let me know in the comments below, and thank you guys for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and use code CRUNCH20 on G Fuel for 30% off on your order, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace out.